Sports with Sean Caravilles.
So how did life change for Usain Bolt following his 100 meters world record at the Beijing Olympics? Here's BBC 5 Live.
When Usain Bolt retires from racing after this month's World Championships in London, he will do so as the most famous man in his sport. A superstar both to those who love athletics and to those who never cared until he came along. We know about the world records, the 8 Olympic golds, the 11 world titles, the funky moves on the blocks and his sweet celebrations afterwards. But it wasn't always this way. At the start of summer 2008, 21 years old, there was talent, but no titles. He had only ever run the 100 metres twice, never under 10 seconds. Then, by the middle of August, he had been transformed. A global sporting hero, double Olympic champion, world record holder over both 1 and 200 metres. The coolest kid in the most iconic of events. As Bolt comes to the end, we go back to the beginning. This is the story of the few short months that changed his life and transformed his sport forever. This is Usain Bolt, 100 days that shook the world.
He had never run the event before in any meaningful way.
And Bolt is coming through to take up the running.
Everyone was serious, no one was talking. You see him was lying on the ground, laughing and giggling like he was, on the beach in Jamaica.
Elvis Presley, Muhammad Ali, they bring a certain personality to it that is just infectious. So he's one of those.
He didn't think about he was at the Olympics, he didn't think about the semi-final, he didn't think about the final, he was just having fun.
And Bolt is already beginning to draw clear.
It seemed like when I went to third year, he went to fourth. When I went to fourth, he went to fifth.
It's a new world record, and again he eased up on the way to the line.
I got one aim, and that's the goal. Came out here to win, and that's what I did.
In his first season in the 100 metres, Usain Bolt takes the biggest prize of all, the Olympic gold medal.
Crazy.
So, over the next 90 minutes, we're going to set out those 4 months that effectively changed athletics and introduced the world to this sporting superstar. With me to do that, our athletics correspondent Mike Costello and 2008 Olympic 100 metres finalist Jeanette Kouache. Great to see you both. Mike, you were there trackside that summer. It was an extraordinary period, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, and a period that we might never revisit. We talk about sports stars being once in a decade, once in a generation, even once in a lifetime. But this is a man who stands alone in the entire history of athletics. Jesse Owens might well have been a global superstar on a similar scale had he lived 70 years later. But would he have had that showman-like talent that created that connection with the fans and with his audience? Just last week, I was in Paris at the training camp for the British team ahead of the World Championships starting on Friday. And when I was coming back on one of the evenings on the tube from the edge of Paris into town, there were 2 youngsters sat, and I could tell they were talking about Bolt. I know enough French, and I could hear the Bolt. And at one stage, they both jumped up and did the Bolt sign to the world, pointing to the sky. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They were between, I'd guess, 6 and 8 years of age. And that's just a tiny anecdotal measure of the man's global appeal. And the events of 2008 and all the others since. I've always said sporting events are like great holidays. Part of the package is talking about them beforehand and talking about them afterwards, and all that anticipation beforehand as well. And he's given us so many of those wonderful experiences. And there'll be many, many more programmes being made like this by the BBC and by other media outlets for many years to come.
Jeanette, you understand what it's like to run phenomenally fast, and you know what it's like to do that in the bird's nest.
Mm-hmm.
So was Bolt that summer in Beijing one of the most remarkable things that you've ever seen?
Easily. And what's really strange about that particular Olympics, my 100 metre final was after the men's. Normally it's the other way around. And I will never ever forget being in the call room when he was going through his semi-final, and we could see the big screen. So I was with Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price. She was in my second round race, and he won that race in great fashion. Him and Asafa were going through. It looked fantastic. And Shelly-Ann watching that was so pumped, and I just thought, oh God, she's going to run really fast now. Just seeing her so excited, and you could see the Jamaicans were on the brink of something. It was really special. But to see him do that in that bird's nest was inspiring, and anybody who was there will say the same thing.
It's easy to forget, isn't it, now that Bolt is one of the biggest draws in world sport, and the 100 metres has been re-established as the crown jewels, that at the start of 2008, it was struggling, wasn't it, Mike?
Yes, it was. The year before, the World Championship gold medal had been won by Tyson Gay. He'd completed the sprint double. In fact, in the 200 metres, Usain Bolt finished in the silver medal position. But he didn't have that kind of connection with the audience. Asafa Powell also was running very strongly at the time, but he'd gone into the Olympic Games in 2004 as the gold medal favourite and finished only in 5th place behind Justin Gatlin. And so he'd already been shackled by a reputation of being flaky on the highest occasion. There were those who were allowing him the benefit of the doubt and saying, well, he got it wrong first time round at the Olympic Games, but second time round, he'll get it right. But those two were 1 and 2 in the 100 metres at the end of the preceding year. And there was nothing in the season up until Bolt broke the world record before the Olympic Games to suggest that anything would change that order of the top two in the world. But also you have to remember at the time, Tom, the stench around athletics generally. You know, the sport was still suffering from the fallout of the Balco scandal, the Bay Area Laboratory Cooperative in San Francisco, marshalled and founded by Victor Conte. You know, and within that embrace came Dwayne Chambers testing positive, Marion Jones testing positive, and even Justin Gatlin had been thrown out of the sport 2 years earlier, and he'd won the previous Olympic gold medal over 100 metres. So you had the likes of Gatlin and Marion Jones being thrown out of the sport for drugs offences. You had Gatlin's coach being caught up in the Balco scandal. And so this was a sport in dire straits. You know, we're talking now in the aftermath of the Russian scandal about how bad the sport feels. Back then, it was every bit as bad.
Jeanette, as you elite sprinters are starting your preparations for those Olympics in 2008, who's being talked about as the main contenders in the men's field?
You always go off the back of the indoor season as a sprinter. You kind of see who's been in good form over 60 metres, and the difference, or the problem I should say, with the Jamaicans, they don't run the indoor season, so you never really know what's going on until the Jamaica International. Now, the Jamaica International always falls, I'd say, beginning of May. I reckon, beginning of May. And what's interesting about that particular race, that a lot of the Brits are abroad. We're on warm weather training. So you get this thing, well, back then in 2008, so long ago, things start to filter down in terms of results coming through. And that's when you know who's in good shape, especially outside of Europe, the Americans and Jamaicans, because that competition, that meet always brings out really fast and exciting times. And that's kind of where I first heard about Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce. You know, she ran really well. Then I thought, oh, okay, who's this? And then, you know, history, obviously, you know, we know who she is now. But back then, you always wait for that kind of first weekend of May, and it's Jamaica International.
But before that, no one's talking about Bolt, are they,
no.
as a 100-metre contender?
Nobody's talking about Bolt as a 100-metre contender. The Americans in 2007 were the sprinting superpowers. Tyson Gay, Walter Dix, Darvis Patton. There were so many of them that were running so fast. Jamaica they were there or thereabouts, but Asafa was such a letdown. We were like, oh, you know, we kind of want him to break up the party a bit. He's great, you know, on the circuit, in the Grand Prix, but at the big meets, he never delivers the goods. So we always were expecting the Americans to come out and do the business. So they were the ones that we would potentially be speaking about.
And bear in mind, at the World Championships the previous year in Osaka in Japan, the 100 metres had been billed as this great showdown between Tyson Gay and Asafa Powell. And Asafa Powell faltered yet again to reinforce the suggestion that he just couldn't hack it at the highest level. But there was potentially this great showdown in the 100 metres between Gay and Powell. And so Bolt wasn't even in the conversation as recently as 9 months before the wonders of Beijing.
So when had this gangly kid, Mike, first come onto your radar?
Well, I got a call from a Jamaican commentator in the early part of 2004, and he said to me that you've got to come and see this young kid that we've got. He's 17 and he's going to be very special. And I've got a proposal that I sent to my sports editor at the time, a guy called David Coles, who's now in Australia. And at the end of this proposal, I've put something along the lines of, let's try and get to him now before everybody else does. And I spent a week in Jamaica interviewing him, filming various others, and talking to virtually everybody who matters and who knows what they're talking about in Jamaican athletics. A whole raft of interviews, went to Bolt's family home, went to his school, got a real insight into into what he was and what he might become. And throughout the half-hour documentary that we made for BBC Radio and a shorter form of documentary, a feature really for BBC Television for the old Grandstand programme, Sunday Grandstand, everyone there was talking about him being the natural successor to Michael Johnson. This is in the early part of 2004.
So he's going to be a 200-metre runner and maybe a 400-metre runner.
And already has the junior record in Jamaica for the 400 metres. And so that's what they're pushing him towards. And the thinking at the time was that he's too tall to be a 100-metre sprinter. Nobody that tall has ever made any kind of impact at the highest level. And they were talking in this documentary about him being potentially one of, if not the greatest Jamaican athlete ever. I don't think even they at that time realised just how special he might be. But they had this golden memory, you see, of him winning the World Junior Championships, which Jeanette was at in 2002, at the age of 15. And when you consider this is competition for under 20s, to win at 15, I always say that one way to measure a sporting achievement and the value of it is on the scale of rarity. If it's never been done before, it must be pretty special. No one before, no one since has won a World Junior Championship gold medal at the age of 15. It's remarkable. And that was what was the basis, the genesis of the excitement in Jamaica at the time.
So people thought, after he had that success at 200 metres, that if he was going to change it to a different event, it would be to the 400. So how come, without warning or any sort of previous form, he dropped down to the 100 instead? Here's his agent, Ricky Sims.
I think Usain was always asking to run 100 throughout 2005 and 6. He was primarily a 200-metre runner at that time, and everyone thought he would move up to the 400 metres to do like Michael Johnson was a 200, 400 guy. And because of his height and everything, everyone thought he'd be very well suited to the 400. But he didn't like the 400-metre training, as everyone's well aware who follows his career. And he always used to tell me in 2005 and 6, pretend there's no 200 in the meet and they have to put me in the 100. Tell coach, he couldn't get into the 200, they'll let him run the 100. He'd like come up with every trick in the book, and I was like, that can't work, that's not going to happen. So it was kind of a running joke, but he was serious about it. And then I think in 2007, I remember one day at the track, he was going on about it again, and his coach and myself were both there, and he was saying, give me one try. And coach said, okay, if you break the national record in the 200 metres, we'll let you run 100 somewhere. And he did that at the national championships in 2007, and then he ran a 100 in Rethymno in 2007 in July, and he ran 10:03. And he hadn't prepared for the 200 metres at all, so I think that surprised a lot of people. And he won the race, which was something else which we didn't really expect. And I think that made him believe, hey, I can do all right at the 100 metres as well.
But realistically then, moving into 2008, what were you expecting? And were there any grand plans based around the 100 metres at that stage?
Yeah, I think a big turning point in his career, as he's mentioned in interviews, is in 2007 he finished second at the World Championships in the 200 metres to Tyson Gay. And he kind of came off the turn, normally he would be very strong, and he said he was going as hard as he could and he couldn't get past him. So I think that was the year I remember coming home that night and he was saying, coach, I give it everything I had and I only got second. And the coach sat him down and said, yeah, but you didn't go to the weights room, you haven't done, you've been training like almost part-time the last couple of years. You were coming from injury, so he was trying to rebuild him. But he said, if you apply yourself the way these other guys are applying yourself, then you can be the best in the world, you'll win these races easily. And it kind of was almost like a penny dropped that night, and the winter of 7 going into 8, he really applied himself very well. He was training, turning up to every training session. He was not going out as much as he liked to do when he was younger, things like that. So, and I think then at the start of 2008, I remember being at the World Indoors and I got a message, hey, Usain just ran 10:00 in a small race in Jamaica, and that was in March when everyone was just doing the indoor season. So we already knew, all right, he's fast this year, he's trained well. So yeah, I think throughout the 07, after the 10:03, he knew that I can run good at 100 as well as 200 metres. So I think that was kind of in the mind over that winter.
Usain Bolt's agent Ricky Sims with Mike there on how Bolt came to start running the 100 metres. Jeanette, that forgotten about race in Crete in July 2007. Mm-hmm. In retrospect, is that the most important 10:03 in athletics history? It's the sliding doors moment, isn't it?
It is. And I've ran on that track. It's a great track. And it's a game changer. It's a definite game changer because it gives him a different type of confidence, and he probably had fun. And I think when you have fun in a particular event, you just want to keep on doing it. You know, you're winning, you feel confident, and that's what he's about. You can clearly see his driver is the fun element, and the 100 metres is a fun event. When you're younger, you turn up to, you know, your local athletics track, and if you're a sprinter or you're fast, the first thing you want to do is the 100 metres. The 200 metres, okay, yeah, I'm not a fan. But, you know, for many young people, it's the 100 metres. And for him, you know, he had to beg to do it. And to go out there in Rhythmno and do what he did, absolute game changer, fun times. Let's see if we can take it any further, I reckon.
But equally important, I think, was we were hearing there from Ricky, him going to the coach and saying, look, I gave it everything in the 200 metres and it wasn't happening. I couldn't close the gap on Tyson Gay. And the coach said to him, well, look, you're going to have to do more work. And there are those that wouldn't be prepared to do that would want to exist on talent alone. And it's just a shining example of how talent is only as good as the work that's put in as the foundation to make it as strong as it is and to give him the platform to produce that when it matters.
It's funny, isn't it, Mike, looking back that fear of 400 metre training and that bet, little wager he has with his coach Glenn Mills, changes the face of sport forever.
And how many times, you know, have we seen that? Not in athletics, but those moments where an athlete's career and trajectory changes because they have somebody around them that they're prepared to listen to and prepared to take the advice of.
So we come to the 3rd of May 2008. It's the Jamaican Invitational Meet in Kingston. It's nothing special at that point. There's no real big stars. There's not a massive crowd. Yet Bolt, in only his 3rd ever senior 100 metre race, runs 9.76 seconds. It's the second fastest time in history. It's only 200ths of a second behind the world record of his compatriot, Asafa Powell. It was so much of a shock that many couldn't actually believe it, could they? Including former world 200 metre champion and now NBC broadcaster Atto Boldon.
I dismissed it. Somebody called me or sent me a text or something, and I saw the time and I went, oh, please, 9.76. No, not by that guy. I'm like, this guy's a 200 metre guy. He can't run 9.7. I mean, I didn't even pay much attention to it. I just assumed that it was either a broken wind gauge or somebody had gotten the timing system completely wrong, and I never even gave it another thought.
Because it was a low-key race, wasn't it? And he wasn't up against any particular big names.
Exactly. And plus, for somebody to run 9.7 sort of out of the blue, I don't think, I mean, if you look at the all-time list, there's nobody on that list who ran 9.7 who didn't run 9.8 or 9.9 or, you know, or something close to it before. 9.7 is not a time that you run for your first sub-10. Well, unless you're Usain Bolt.
Jeanette, first of all, what did you elite sprinters think when that time flashes up?
Just confirms that all sprinters think the same. I was listening to Atto dismissing it. Everybody did, because it was in Jamaica, and we just thought, oh, come on, 9.76.
And does that clock in that stadium, the international stadium, it's got a bit of a reputation, hasn't it?
A tiny bit of reputation, but at the same time, I think everybody in the pit of their stomach thought, oh God, this is like, okay, it's an Olympic year and you expect times to be hot, but not that hot. So I think a lot of us, just like Atto said, we just kind of dismissed it and said, oh, let's see how he gets on when he comes to Europe.
Mike, put into context for people who might not understand what 9.76 means, how fast it was compared to what else was out there.
Well, the number of men in history who've run 9.7 seconds, you could count on a single hand. But what surprised most people was the amount of improvement in almost a single instance here. But, you know, in my naivety, I don't have the background in sprinting of Jeanette or any of those people that we've been hearing from, Tyson Gay and Atto Boldon. But in my naivety, I remember listening back again to mention this documentary that I made. And one of the comments that I got from one of the coaches who was around Usain Bolt at the time, a Jamaican coach called Fitz Coleman, said, this kid, he said at the time, and he was 17 when I was in Jamaica, this kid is like Bambi. When he learns to run, you just watch him go. Now, as I say, nobody at that stage was talking about the 100 metres. They were talking about how he was ungainly on the bend at that stage. But that comment stuck with me. Wait till he learns how to run. And that's why, yes, I was surprised, but not shocked. And there is a difference. And it was just, for me, just that all that I'd heard in 2004 was now starting to really take shape, because in 2004, we shouldn't forget, he did go to the Olympic Games and was eliminated in a first round heat, finished only in 5th place. Now, some say, and even he himself says, that he was injured at the time, but my feeling is the Jamaicans wouldn't have let a 17-year-old kid go to the Games if he was injured. There's just too much of a future to play with there. But he flounced out in 5th place in his first round heat. And at that stage, you know, people were thinking that this was a potential superstar, another one that was going to fall by the wayside, who'd done too much too young and was burnt out too young.
So when he runs that time, Jeanette, there must be part of you who is suddenly hugely excited. We've all heard about what Bolt might do. Suddenly, he's doing it.
It's a really, really crazy situation for a male sprinter in particular when they see that happen. The only person to have gone faster than him at that point was Asafa Powell, a fellow Jamaican. So what you now have is Tyson Gay probably rocking back and forth somewhere thinking, oh God, what's happening? Asafa Powell doing exactly the same, because here comes Usain, who can run a very good 200. He's about to drop down to the 100, so everything changes for both of these guys. And they're thinking, right, it's not just a two people party anymore. We're going to go, and Usain's probably going to come with us. So it's very much about going through the season and just avoiding each other. They don't want to race each other throughout the season. But for Tyson and for Usain, where Usain didn't have a track record in terms of running really fast 100s, he needed to get the practice in. So they'd meet a lot earlier than anticipated.
Is the speculation starting already at that point? OK, if he's running 9.76 now in his 3rd senior crack at the 100 metres, what's he going to be doing in 2 months, in 3 months?
You would hope that he's peaked early.
If you're not Jamaican.
You're hoping that he's peaked early for one of his competitors, and you're thinking, oh God, he can't carry that on until August. But yeah, you get that thinking, right, he's either going to go one of two ways. He's going to completely burn out. By the time he gets to Beijing, he's going to be running 10 seconds flat, or actually he could be running, you know, the other way. And it's a real challenge, but you have to focus on yourself. If you worry too much about what's going on around you, then straight away you've lost the race.
So Mark, you knew the kid as he was then, 21 years old. Were you able to look into the future at that point in May and have any inkling at all of what was to follow?
No, because the only big championship experience I had to go on for him was the World Juniors in Kingston in 2002. He said at the time that I interviewed him for the first time in 2004 that he would never experience pressure like that. That was hard to believe at that stage. But having witnessed his first round attempt in 2004 and seen him come through only in 5th place, albeit with those around him saying that he was injured, I still didn't have enough proof that he could reproduce his very best form on the biggest stage of all. Yes, he'd run second in a World Championships, but the Olympic Games is different again to the World Championships. So there was still enough of an element of uncertainty around his ability to produce on the highest stage, for sure, especially in the 100 metres.
So Bolt's world and that of athletics is starting to change. According to his business manager, Norman Peart, that run in Kingston nailed down for the first time the idea that Bolt might double up, that he might run both the 1 and the 200 metres at that August's Olympic Games.
When you run 9.76 for 100, then it's not a question if you're taken seriously. It's a question if you're going to be mad enough not to try to run the 100, you know, because that's definitely a gold medal performance. So everything happened in a flash. You know, that's why we say lightning bolt. And it just kept going and going and going. And that 9.76 in Jamaica in 2008 pretty much sealed the deal that he would double.
Still to come on Usain Bolt, 100 days that shook the world, we will hear about Bolt's astonishing record-breaking runs in New York and Beijing, and find out what it's actually like to run against him.
This is 5 Live Sport.
I'm BBC Chief Sports Writer Tom Fordyce, and you're listening to our Usain Bolt special, 100 Days That Shook the World. This is the inside story of how a 21-year-old 100 metres novice became the fastest man in history. With me, BBC Athletics correspondent Mike Costello and Olympic 100 metres finalist Jeanette Quatche. So, it's May 2008. Bolt has just gone sub-10 for the first time. But as we heard from Atto Boldon and Tyson Gay, a lot of people were sceptical that his 9.76 could be real. 2 weeks later, when he clocks 9.92 in Port of Spain in his next race, the doubters grew louder. On May the 31st, on a wet night in the Big Apple, he would silence them for good.
Yeah, I'm out at Brooklyn. Now I'm down in Tribeca, right next to De Niro. But I'll be hood forever. I'm the new Sinatra. And since I made it here, I can make it anywhere. Yeah, they love me everywhere. I used to cop in Harlem.
That Diamond League meet on Randall's Island, New York City. Bolt, the Callow Kid, against reigning world champion Tyson Gay. Atto Bolden was on co-commentary duties for American broadcaster NBC. Was he expecting something special?
I actually was. In fact, we had this big conversation. The guy who was doing the broadcast with me is a guy called Carter Blackburn. It was his very first track and field meet, and they had scared him by saying, "Listen, you're going to be working with Atto Bolden, and he's good, and you don't want to not be good next to him." So he had over prepared. So I was very impressed just talking to him before the race, and in fact, he and I said, "So imagine if you get a world record tonight in your very first track and field meet." And what some people forget is that there was a huge lightning storm that came through the venue, and we were actually delayed. And I remember saying to him, I said, this is actually a good thing because, there are some experts who believe that after, one, a lightning storm, and two, the track being wet, that it actually gives more bounce, and this could be very favorable for any sort of a fast time. And just about everything that we thought would happen that evening happened. So if you listen to Carter Blackburn's call in the first maybe 40 or 50 meters, he says, "Will it be a special night?" Or he says something to the sort of foreshadowing that maybe this is going to be really good.
And there'd been a full start as well, hadn't there? Just to add to the pressure on him.
Yes, just to bring the drama to a real fever pitch.
And it's strange looking back now, but probably for a lot of people, they had Tyson Gay as favourite going into that race because he was the reigning double world champion, wasn't he?
Yes, and he should have been. I don't remember how we set up the race, but I'm pretty sure that we set it up as, look, these two guys were the first two across the line at the World Championships at 200 meters last year at the World Championships in Osaka. But no, I think maybe in my mind I had given a slight edge to Tyson because, as you said, he was the world champion. So it wasn't that we were necessarily expecting a world record from Bolt. I think we just figured that the presence of both of them would make for something special.
Mike, you've been there on so many big sporting occasions. You did Mayweather-Pacquiao in Vegas. You were there for Super Saturday, London 2012. You've watched Sachin Tendulkar score a test ton in Mumbai. There's something special in the air on those nights, isn't there?
Yes, there is. And I chuckle sometimes when I look back on some of these evenings because the likes of Darren Campbell and Richie Woodall in particular, who I've worked with in athletics and in boxing, laugh at me because they say that when I'm walking to an arena or a stadium, I suddenly quicken and leave them way, way behind. Darren finds it hilarious when I'm walking to a big stadium. As the stadium comes into view, suddenly I just quicken and almost run. And that's not deliberate. That's just the fan in me emerging as well as the commentator. But that's what the likes of Usain Bolt do too. Even the most hardened ringsiders or track and field watchers. They can make you believe. They can turn a cynic into a dreamer all over again just because of the special events they've created in the past.
So let's go where Usain Bolt went. This is Tyson Gay and what it was like in the call room moments before the race.
There was no antics. There was no joking around, playing around, and that didn't happen until later on. He was just a regular guy.
And you're a humble guy, aren't you? You don't tend to trash talk as a sprinter.
No.
Did you feel that you wanted to show the contender what the king could do?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, when he came to New York, he came to America, that's my soil.
Double world champion Tyson Gay there. Jeanette, you've been that young up-and-comer going into a call room with the superstars.
Mm-hmm.
That's not normal behaviour from Bolt, is it?
No, It's not normal behaviour. It's not. And it just oozes confidence. And I think that for Tyson to say, for Bolt to come to New York and do what he did, it is a big, big deal. I always say to myself, when people are coming to your hometown, you have to be ready. And I think that race changed so much psychologically, not necessarily physically, psychologically it changed so much because you're dealing with a different type of sprinter now, a sprinter that's never kind of, in recent years been that good and that confident at the same time in an Olympic year. It's just unheard of. And I think for Tyson, you did say to him he's quite a humble sprinter, and he is. He doesn't like to joke around. He takes his time. He's very considered with everything that he does. So to have that kind of energy come into a call room, it can completely rattle you.
And what's fascinating about Bolt's development off the track is that when I went to see him in 2004, he was as nervous as a kitten when the camera was put in front of him. Mm-hmm. It was like the camera was a shotgun. And yet within 4 or 5 years, this inner belief had started to manifest itself in this showboating character.
You could almost see it, couldn't you, when he won the World Junior title at 15. If you watch the footage of that,
I was there.
When he's on the blocks, when he's on the blocks, he looks so nervous, doesn't he?
Oh, yeah.
He's looking around, he's shaking, he wins it, and it's almost as if in that moment the metamorphosis begins. He salutes the crowd.
I told him I was there, I saw it all. I will never ever forget that race. I never forget that race. I was 19, so I was coming to the end of my junior career, and everybody was talking about this kid, Usain Bolt. The stadium was capacity. It was 40,000 people in this stadium for junior athletics. And the 200-metre gun goes, and off he comes around that bend, really gangly. And he had a really weird technique. He kind of, leant to his left side a little bit, coming around the bend. And as he comes into the home straight, he's so far ahead of everybody that the crowd are actually losing it. Okay, like they're completely gone. He crosses the line in first place. Never ever forget this. And as he stops and salutes the crowd, they start chanting his name. And I'm like, what is going on here? He runs I think the clock stopped at 20.59, but they rounded it up. Don't quote me. Mike, don't quote me. I think they rounded up to 20.61, and it's a world junior record. And I'm just sat there thinking, what has just happened here? And that was 2002. And it's crazy to think that, someone like that has grown into this incredible legend of a sprinter, and we're nearing towards the end. It's madness.
So Tyson Gay said there, Mike, that it was his soil that night on Randall's Island. You were in the shadow of the great tower blocks of Manhattan on Randall's Island. At the same time, there is a huge expat Jamaican community in New York, isn't there? They're packing out the bleachers that night. So who's under more pressure?
It's difficult to say because with revisionist history, we're starting to treat Usain Bolt back then in New York as the superstar that he is now. But back then, before that race in New York, we were still wondering, what if? What can he do in the 100 metres? We had such little evidence to go on, so we weren't talking about a superstar. Those Jamaicans that were coming to watch this kid that they heard about who'd won the World Junior Championship in 2002. They would not have been coming to watch him break a world record because they just would not have expected that.
So let's step into the race. Here's Atto Bolden again.
As with most Usain races, the first half, you don't really get a sense of what's going to happen. When you see him pulling away from, somebody like Tyson Gay, who I think at that point had already run 9.84 or so. I think at that point you my eyes went immediately to the clock. and which is what I typically do when somebody starts doing that. It's what I did a year later in Beijing as well.
You can hear the shock in your voice on the commentary. First, when you see the time, which initially came up as 9.71, you're almost hoarse. And then there's the shout when you see the wind gauge. The wind is good. There's disbelief in your voice.
Yeah, it's and good thing I was prepared, and good thing I can live with the call because it's people look back now and they go, wow, that was the first one. And when you look at that one, the rest of his career sort of makes sense. I was in genuine not disbelief, but to see somebody that tall run that fast and to have this relative unknown in the 100. I had known Usain from his junior exploits and obviously from the World Championship silver the year before. But to see somebody come, he destroyed the world champion. The reigning world champion had no answer for what Usain Bolt did that evening. And no, I'm actually pretty proud of the call, because I think anybody who, if you've never seen Usain Bolt run before and you never saw anything he did after, if you saw that one race and then saw my reaction to it, I think it was a genuine reaction of, oh my gosh, what have we just seen? And more importantly, what does this mean for the future? Because I think that was one of the things that I managed to incorporate in there, and that is, this is a game changer. This guy is going to be, he's the man to beat now.
That's NBC commentator and former world 200-metre champion Atto Boldon on Usain Bolt's 9.72 world record in May 2008. So the record books have now changed forever. So too had Tyson Gay.
Oh, man, it was crazy, because that 9.71 race, I wasn't completely healthy that race, but, when you give it 110%, you can feel it in that race. You can feel how fast you're going through the wind. You can feel how fast your arms are moving, your legs are moving, and I was tapped out. I had the pedal to the metal, as they say, and it seemed like when I went to third gear, he went to fourth. When I went to fourth, he went to fifth. So that's the only way I can describe it.
Jeanette, that is a fabulous insight, isn't it?
It is.
Is that what it's like?
Exactly. The accuracy is actually quite scary. When somebody is beating you in a race and you're trying to shift gears, but they're still shifting, it is just the worst thing. It's happened to me before, obviously. But listening to Tyson explain that is crazy, because they're moving so fast. 9.7. Any of the British boys that will be listening to that and thinking about 9.7, unless you've ran it, I don't think you understand what the body is going through to get to that kind of speed. And especially if you're trying to chase someone going at that speed, it's just crazy. So you can hear the defeat in Tyson's voice. He's just like, okay, he's going and I can't catch him. And there's a real element of fear there, because you're in May. The Olympics is in August. You've probably got about 10 weeks. There's only so much you can do at that level in 10 weeks to try and beat someone who is shifting like that. It's a really hard work.
And that in those 10 weeks, the man who is virtually a novice is only going to get better. And Atto used the phrase game-changing there. And in one aspect where it was game-changing was in allowing coaches to believe that being tall was not a disadvantage. If you go back to that time, 10 years ago, and only 10 years ago, it was described as a disadvantage to be too tall for the 100 metres. Now it's described as an advantage if you can turn the legs over at the required speed.
So at this point, Bolt is achieving remarkable things in the 100 metres. In only his fifth race, he's become the world record holder. How has he done it? Partly, it was down to dedication. Here's his business manager, Norman Peart.
He would have been on like a 2-4 program, when he likes something, he'll go for it, whether it's entertainment or business. As long as he likes it, he's going to put his all into it. And he was excited about running 100. And that pretty much made him train much harder, do his exercises, strength programs and stuff like that. It was a different Bolt, because he saw that he could really shine. And of course, the 100 meters is a blue ribbon event, so he wanted to be in that spotlight.
Now, sport being what it is, athletics having been where it had been, there were those who had alternative theories. Former world record holder and Olympic champion Carl Lewis said that summer, "When people ask me about Bolt, I say he could be the greatest athlete of all time. But for someone to run 10.03 one year and 9.69 the next, if you don't question that in a sport that has the reputation it has right now, then you're a fool." Mike, Bolt has never failed a test. He's been a consistent and strong advocate for clean sport. But at that point, were there whispers on the circuit? Were there people doubting what he was doing?
Oh, there had to be, because of that level of improvement and because it was the 100 metres. Of all the events in the sport that have been tainted by drugs, the blue ribbon event of athletics was one of the worst affected, no question about it. So many of the fastest men in history had at some stage tested positive, and that has actually continued after the emergence of Usain Bolt. And that's something that he's had to deal with, not just around that time, but throughout his career. I remember a very tetchy press conference just a couple of years ago before the World Championships in Beijing. The last of his meetings before going to Beijing was the anniversary games, a huge turnout at the press conference at a hotel in London. And one particular journalist who'd never covered athletics before asked him about this. And for just about the only time I've ever seen him snap in a situation like that, because he's normally in such command, he snapped at this reporter and said, just look at what I've done all the way through my career, going back to what I did as a youngster. And if you trace it all the way back to what we're talking about here, that success at 15 at the World Junior Championships, it is easier, and it was easier then, not easy, but easier then, to believe in what you were seeing because he'd done such extraordinary things as a junior. But there is no doubt that there was so much scepticism at the time because of the level of improvement and how quickly it came about.
Jeanette, did you believe in him?
I did. He's hyper-talented, you can see it. You don't run that fast as a junior and not expect to be able to bring it through as a senior. Granted, there are not many athletes that are able to transition healthily and do it on a world stage, but what he has done is have a steady trajectory, and it's realistic. You heard Norman Piet say that he was on a 2-4 program. What that means is on a 200 metre, 400 metre program. He has the speed endurance. If you have the technical know-how and the coaching, that really benefits you when you drop down to the shorter distances. He hasn't got the best start, but when he gets going and he's up into his running, it is scarily fast. He decelerates at a slower rate than other athletes and is able to push through the line, which is why you get that fast time. So I do believe in him because I've seen the fast times with my own eyes, and 15 years old, when you're running that fast, 10 years later, why can't you be where he was?
So we'd never before seen a sprinter of 6'5", have we? If you think about Maurice Greene, Olympic champion in 2000, 5'9". So what difference does that height make? Here's Atto Bolden, and first, Tyson Gay.
He changed the sport. He changed the 100 meter. He changed the idea of tall guys can't get out the block well. So he what do they say? Reinvented the wheel, I guess, maybe.
The joke is that my generation, Maurice Greene and some of the other guys, we were not particularly tall. Maurice is 5'9", just like I am. So I think when Usain showed back up, and then thinking about like Asafa Powell and Francis Obakwelu, I think in my mind I sort of went, okay, so the tall guy era is back.
Right, Jeanette, I want a sprinting masterclass for us joggers. Okay? Why can't a tall guy start fast?
They just don't have. It's the leverage. You're at that level on the floor. You're very close to the ground, and to be able to move your limbs and those kind of levers at pace is very, very challenging. You get to 30 meters and you're up and you're running. That's where you start to actually have your advantage. I'm short. I'm 5'3.5", 5'4" on a good day. And for me to be able to get out, I had one of the best starts in the UK, in the world. So that was always easy for me. When I got into my running, not so much. I couldn't cover the ground. So it's the opposite. It's the opposite with Usain Bolt. Him not being able to get his legs moving at a quick pace out of the blocks at that low level is the reason why some people say he's at a disadvantage. But you can see that he's worked on his start over the years. You can see that he's really, really had to work on it. And I think that what's scary, when he nailed it, a few times when he nailed it, you could see that actually, wow, yeah, he's put the two together. This is going to be ridiculously fast.
And even as recently as Beijing in 2015, he stumbled soon after the start. And he went back, and his coach, Glenn Mills, said to him, don't worry, because he ran very quickly. And his coach said, look, if you're running that quickly, imagine what you're going to do now when you get the start right in the final. Because in the build-up, of course, Justin Gatlin was running flying times. Bolt had been injured. And so there was this great doubt around the ability of Bolt to defend the title that he won so impressively on the previous World Championship occasion in Moscow.
So Bolt ran only a couple more times before the Beijing Games. A month and a half after that stunning breakthrough in Kingston, he returned to the Jamaican capital and he ran 9.85 seconds. So by his exalted standards, that was sort of steady but no more. And then at the end of July, he runs 9.89 in Stockholm, but he's beaten by Asafa Powell.
And second time they do get away, and it's a much better start by Asafa Powell. Usain Bolt is a metre adrift with 40 metres to go. Asafa Powell is not going to be caught this evening. Powell on the run to the line, just gets there from Bolt in second place. The winning time, 9.89 seconds. A huge smile on the face of Asafa Powell.
Mike, did that defeat to sharpen up the excitement going into Beijing even more?
No question about it, because the best sporting events have this element I was talking about earlier on of uncertainty. And had Bolt been winning everything through from New York all the way to Beijing, then we would have built up this picture of a great showman who was about to give us an exhibition without any real contest. But that defeat in Stockholm was enough to create that element of doubt around it. And also, as I said earlier, his failure to do anything, even get out of the first round in 2004 at the Olympic Games, we wonder whether that might be playing on his mind as well. You have to remember, when he went into the Olympic Games in Beijing, we're talking about a 21-year-old here, and from Jamaica. He had this pressure that Jeanette was talking about so lyrically at the World Junior Championships in 2002, but that was Jamaican pressure from his island. What about the pressure of the entire athletics world? Completely different, and that was why there was this uncertainty. And not just from me on the outside, but some great athletes also doubted his ability to do it at the Olympics.
Jeanette, you're staying in the same Olympic village, series of tower blocks, just next to the Olympic Park where the bird's nest is, where the water cube is. Now, elite athletes, you have to be selfish, don't you? You have to put yourself first. So I'm sure you're thinking about your own race, about your own 100-metre heats.
Absolutely.
At the same time, is Usain Bolt, is the 100 metres the talk of the village?
Yes, it definitely is. But you are right. You are so consumed with what you're there to do. And like I said, my 100-metre final was actually after Usain's race. So I kind of wasn't in that space where I'm very excited about seeing what he ran. But I was in the stadium the night that he did what he did. And like I said, with Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price, I had 3 Jamaicans in my race, Shelly-Ann Fraser-Price, Cameron Stewart and Sharon Simpson. I just thought, oh God, like they are going to be so pumped. And this is scary stuff. What he's doing is amazing. And, you know, there's a Jamaican contingent out here that are ready to take over. It was just incredible to be part of.
But we shouldn't run away with revisionist history here, because I remember we may even have had a debate about it, a lengthy debate on 5 Live about who was going to be the star of the Games. Would it be Usain Bolt or would it be Michael Phelps in the pool? And there was this huge debate about who would strike in the most effective way and with the most impact around the world. Would it be Michael Phelps or would it be Usain Bolt? And Phelps, of course, had so many more chances for exposure because he was in so many different races.
So that's the atmosphere in Beijing. Back in Jamaica, you probably thought that Bolt was the big favourite. But his business manager, Norman Peart, said it was actually Asafa Powell who was the real Jamaican darling.
Asafa has always been more popular than you see it in Jamaica.
Why?
The girls. You know the thing, you know, he's a sex symbol kind of thing, you know, whatever in sports. You know, you can't separate sex and sports. So pretty much it's always about Asafa, you know, being a sexy symbol or whatever. So he has always had that, still has it. But for Usain having run that time and looking good, they're more banked on Usain to get the gold medal.
Mike, are you a Asafa or Usain man?
Now, I remember, again, in making this documentary in 2004, we were talking also about Asafa Powell, who'd run very quickly at the end of the previous season, 2003. And I was talking to his coach, Stephen Francis, and I said, do you think he can cause a surprise come the Olympics in 2004? And he said, by the time we get to the Olympics, Asafa Powell won't be a surprise. And sure enough, when he got to the Olympic Games in 2004, he was the gold medal favourite, but finished only in 5th place behind Justin Gatlin. But there was still plenty, even in Jamaica, who were prepared to give him a second chance come the Olympics in Beijing in 2008. There were those who even thought that him being in the race would take some of the pressure off Usain, and it would also be useful to Usain to have somebody that he could describe as a friend to be around him in the village, in the call room, and around all of the aspects of the race.
Still to come on Usain Bolt, 100 days that shook the world. We will take you inside the call room in the Bird's Nest Stadium ahead of the biggest race at the world's biggest sporting jamboree, the men's 100 metres Olympic final.
This is 5 Live Sport.
We've been looking at how Bolt went from barely having run the 100 metres to becoming the world's fastest man in 2008. With me, BBC Athletics correspondent Mike Costello and Olympic 100 metres finalist Jeanette Quache. So we're now in Beijing for the Olympic Games. And I remember those last few days before the 100-metre heats. And at times it was quite surreal. Bolt went to a press conference and he appeared with Scottish singer Paolo Nutini, I think, because Bolt had some new gold spikes for the Olympics and Paolo had that song, didn't he? New Shoes. Do you remember that one, Mike?
And what was, I thought, different about that was when you go to the Olympic Games, and it's the case with just about every athlete apart from Usain Bolt, they are team press conferences. And I remember arriving in Beijing and being told there's a press conference for Usain Bolt at such and such a time in such and such a place. And I thought, that's really strange because usually it's a Jamaican team press conference, it's an American team press conference, and they put up 4 or 5 selected athletes, a British team press conference, likewise 4 or 5 selected athletes. But here, this was new ground. This was a press conference for a single athlete. There wasn't a press conference for Michael Phelps. And all the time now, you're starting to get the impression that this is different. Something is happening here that we might never experience again.
And it was absolutely rammed, wasn't it? And you had representatives from across the globe. There was questions coming from Japanese reporters, from Russian reporters. And I remember him being asked, so how are you going to do in the 100 metres? And he sort of gave sort of a quizzical look and said, I'm not even sure I'm running the 100 metres. And everyone said, what? And he said, well, my coach hasn't told me I am. And someone said to him, oh no, we've spoken to him, you're doing the 100 metres. Oh, okay.
Again, but this is something we forget, you see, because there was this concern within Jamaican athletic circles that they were putting too much too soon on the shoulders of an athlete who was, I repeat, just 21 years of age. Why go for 2 events? And, you know, back then it was still 4 rounds. Nowadays are only 3 rounds because they have the preliminary round. But back then it was still 4 rounds. So potentially 4 rounds in the 100 metres, 4 rounds in the 200 metres. 8 races in 6 days for a 21-year-old body. Again, you know, just transplanting ourselves back in time, there was genuine concern about whether this was too much too soon. And there was also a feeling that still his best event, his strongest event, was the 200. There was definite doubt about his ability to do the double all the way through until we arrived in Beijing.
And then you'd hear these rumours coming out of the athletes' village that apparently Usain, who was rooming with the decathlete Marie Smith, was 2 doors down from Asafa, and Usain was actually so excited about his first Olympics that he kept knocking on Asafa's door. He wanted to talk about the race. Poor old Asafa, who maybe understands a little bit more what is at stake, keeps telling him to go away. Maurice, take him off my hands.
Of all the rumours you might struggle with, that one I have no difficulty at all in believing.
Do you know, and I agree with Mike, I genuinely can believe that because the whole Jamaican team are so relaxed about things. And you know, the late Jermaine Mason at the time was with us on the British team and he was our ticket into the Jamaican team. We'd go with him to all the parties and everything else. And he was really close with Usain, so we had a little bit of insight in just how relaxed they were. And I envied that a little bit because we as the British team was so uptight. It was just, I couldn't breathe. I felt so restricted. And you'd head into the Jamaican team and their apartments, everything's just chilled, relaxed. They got their chef, the food's great. They just look like they're just having a great time. I'm like, right, I really want to be Jamaican right now.
So when we hear these stories about Usain waking up his roommate, Marie Smith, at 3 a.m. and saying, listen, I'm quite hungry, should we pop down to the cafe and get some chicken nuggets?
Oh, God.
That's not washing with Team GB.
Nah, no way. Absolutely no way.
So there were 2 rounds of heats on the 15th of August, all the big names safely through. And then, in his semi-final, in the early evening of August the 16th, Bolt served intention of what he was about to do.
And they're away first time, and a good start by Walter Dix, but it's Usain Bolt who picks up best. Mark Burns of Trinidad is also running strongly. Edgar is being outpaced. Usain Bolt again eases up on the run to the line. 9.85 seconds with a negligible wind. He has run like the gold medal favourite that he is.
9.85, and he's easing down. Mike, as you're watching that, what are you thinking?
I remember thinking, it can't be this easy. Sprinting just can't be this easy.
It's not.
I mean, he slammed on the brakes almost before he got into his drive phase and is still clocking 9.85 seconds. Even my limited knowledge of sprinting and how it's done was telling me this is something really, really weird.
So suddenly, the 21-year-old Bolt is the hot favourite. So how does he handle that immense pressure as he returns to the warm-up track an hour to go before the final? Here's his agent, Ricky Sims.
We had a kind of strategy when he came out after the semi, whether it was good or bad, that we would, have... Usain loves to have fun. He loves jokes. He loves, a little bit of banter. So we decided we'd just turn up the energy and have a lot of banter and talk about cars and girls and football and all the things. But he ran really well in the semi. He looked fantastic. And he came out and we continued with it anyway. His coach and I were taking a hand out of him and joking around. And I remember looking around, I think it was, maybe 15-20 minutes before he had to go back in the call room. And he was already warmed up, so he just had to stay a little bit loose. And I looked around and I saw the other athletes who were competing in the final. It was the last event. The track was pretty much empty except for 8 athletes with their maybe 2 or 3 people around them. Everyone was a different side of the tracks. One guy was completely sweating, stressed out. Everyone was serious. No one was talking. Usain was lying on the ground, laughing and giggling like he was, on the beach in Jamaica. And I remember I turned to this physio and said, "Hey, time to go now. Let's get serious again." And just that 45, 50-minute period, he didn't think about it. He was at the Olympics. He didn't think about the semi-final. He didn't think about the final. He was just having fun, and that's the best way to get the best out of Usain, just to keep him relaxed. And we had a bet then. I think one of the things we were talking about is betting how fast he could run in the race, and everyone was, "No, it's too fast, that's too slow," whatever. But that was the atmosphere we tried to create for him, and that's how he runs well. And he probably didn't need any of that. We were just thinking he always thinks I stress before the races, but I'm always trying to have a plan A, plan B, plan C, just to be professional. He just gets on with it.
Come on, Jeanette, that's got to be driving you crazy. If you're Usain Bolt's rival before the 100 metres final at the Olympic Games and you see him behaving like that...
I am the athlete crying and sweating in the corner. That is me. That is totally me. And when you have someone that is that confident in a race that you're all about to take part in, it is really hard.
Do you feel beaten already?
Stay focused. Of course, absolutely, because you probably for the last 4 years have thought about this particular moment every single day. And then he's in a press conference the week before saying he doesn't even know if he's doing it. And then when he's finally doing it and doing it well, he's having a jolly. He's lying down on the track. He's having a good time. And you're just thinking, wow, this is going to be a lot harder than you anticipated. But that's what makes him run fast. That's what makes him tick. We spoke about this earlier. He's a fun guy. And if the element of fun is present, then you're going to get a really, really good race from Usain Bolt. And, listening to Ricky say that, it's so true. You walk into the call room and there's only 7 or 8 of you, 7 other people in that room. Everyone else has gone home. You're the last event of the evening. And you're just thinking, when I walk out into that call room, and that's what the bird's nest was, I've just got to go for it. And you're very serious about it. You're very, uptight. You just want to do your best. But then you've got this joker, making signs next to you and having a sing-song. You're like, oh my goodness, am I taking myself too seriously? But again, it's what makes him tick. We're all very different and everybody gets different results in different ways.
I remember Ricky Hatton talking to me when he fought Manny Pacquiao, and he said he saw Manny Pacquiao walking to the ring, looking all around the arena and smiling. And Ricky Hatton's thinking, what is he smiling about? And Pacquiao does that the whole time, as if, to quote an old Soviet Union philosophy, he's making friends with the arena. And that was his way of relaxing on the way to the ring. But it's a very special talent and a very special temperament that can do that.
Those scenes in the call room and then as the athletes went to their blocks were remarkable to watch, weren't they? And according to former world 200-metre champion Atto Boldon, very, very different to what had come before at Olympic finals.
I think of my generation and being in the call room with Linford and Bruni Surin and Maurice Green and Donovan Bailey and Dennis Mitchell and Frankie Fredericks. And it was always a funeral. It wasn't a stare down because I don't think that would have served any purpose. I certainly didn't resort to those sorts of tactics, but I think we had it wrong. And when I looked, the first time I saw a Usain Bolt call room, I went, okay, so that's different. Maybe that's the way we should have done it. Their generation, they shook hands. They shook hands. Like, they would go up and down each lane 1 greets lane 2, and Bolt would go green, and they'd be clowning with Asafa Powell. And I would just look at it and go, wow. if one of those other guys had even stepped in my lane, there might have been a fist fight.
Jeanette, what did you do to Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce?
Shelly-Ann she smiled a lot. Do you remember on the start line of the Olympic final, she was smiling her face off, and I just thought, what are you doing? Like, this is not normal, this is the Olympic final. But then again, it's just that really relaxed attitude among that team. And I'll go as far as saying he's completely changed the game in the way now a lot of athletes showboat on the line. You never really used to see it, but now you see a few athletes doing it. It doesn't look very organic for them. It doesn't look very natural. And I think it's actually putting them off what they're there to do. But if they think, oh, if I take up this relaxed attitude, like you say, then maybe I'll run faster. That's not the case. Stick to what you know, because it's clearly working for him. It may not work for you.
Because Asafa Powell tried it and Johan Blake tried it, and they were like the old dads dancing in the nightclub. They really were. It just didn't work.
Look right.
It looked like they'd been practicing in the hotel bathroom all night long, but when the camera turned up, it just didn't work.
So we're into the big final itself. 10:30 p.m. local time, 16th of August 2008. Here's the 5 Live commentary team, Bolt's agent Ricky Sims, and first, Atto Boldon.
Beijing was spectacular in terms of electricity in the air.
And they're away first time, and Bolt gets a good start, but so too does Richard Thompson, and Bolt is coming through to take up the running, and Bolt is already beginning to draw clear. Bolt wins in 9.68 seconds. It's a new world record, and again he eased up on the way to the line. It is a staggering performance. 9.69 seconds. The time has been rounded up. In his first season in the 100 metres, Usain Bolt takes the biggest prize of all, the Olympic gold medal.
There's certain things in my life that I will not forget. As I'm saying it to you now, I am flashing back to Usain in that yellow strip, pulling away from the other 7 fastest men in the world, and putting his hands out as if to say, this is not supposed to be this easy.
That could have been way quicker. He started looking around, he looked at the screen, arms went out.
And he spent the last 10 metres with his arms outstretched looking sideways as if to say, guys, where are you?
You know, the way he crossed the line and he looked across and he was expecting Asafa to be ahead of him at 80 metres, because remember Asafa had beaten him in Stockholm in the last race before we went to Beijing. So he was kind of expecting, okay, I'm going to have to work hard for 60, 70. Asafa's going to be there. Hopefully I'll get him at 80 and get past him by 90 and win at 100. But, you know, at 50 metres, 60 metres, he looks across and saw he was leading. It was almost like a shock, like, whoa.
They are dancing in Kingston, Hanover, Ocho Rios, Montego Bay. Now let the carnival begin.
That was the biggest thing. It wasn't the world record, it was the first Jamaican to win 100 metres at the Olympics. So he was like, you know, beating his chest. And that was just genuine reaction.
We've never seen anything like it before or since.
Do you know, I don't think I'll ever forget the shock around the bird's nest that night in those few fast-forward seconds. The way that Bolt just seemed to pull away from the field like he was on some invisible bungee cord. And then the disbelief when people actually remembered to look back, to look at the clock. And then you saw 9.69 and your brain's going, hang on, 9.6? 9.6?
It was staggering, and you could tell by the shock in my voice there. Atto Boldon was talking earlier about the shock in his voice when he was commentating on the race in New York when Bolt broke the world record for the first time. And likewise there, I might have been expecting him to win or to run well, but I wasn't expecting him to break the world record again so soon. And it was the whole manner of the performance as well. There shouldn't be enough time, enough scope in a 100-metre race to introduce personality into the race. There just isn't enough time. Well, there is now, because Usain Bolt's here.
It was the little details, Jeanette, I thought, as much as the time itself. The fact that one of his shoelaces was undone. Yeah. The fact that those last 15 metres, arms outstretched, slapping his chest.
Rulebook out the window. Rulebook absolutely out the window. I always say that an Olympic final is like a tear-up. That's what my coach describes it. It's a schoolyard race. You just go and your technique's out the window. And I'll try and put it into words. You just feel so inspired in your running. It's literally catch me if you can. And nobody was catching him. And when he finally realised that and started beating his chest, I thought, what is happening here? Not only that, you stop the clock at a time nobody has ever seen before. This is phenomenal. And again, the athletes, the buzz, everybody's like, oh my God, this is a fast track. Tomorrow I'm going to run a world record. I'm going to run a personal best. And that's the feeling that he gave us going into that Olympic final, especially for me, definitely.
I remember Alan Wells saying to me, he won gold in 1980 in Moscow. And many years later, I interviewed him about his memories. And he said, the glory about the 100 metres is that even if you've only ever run for a bus or a train, you can understand what we're doing down on the track. And that was the connection that Bolt had, and that he recognised in years after that. And I remember that you were talking there about local time when you were giving the time of the race in Beijing. It was afternoon time in the UK, 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And I remember calling home and speaking to family and friends. I remember my young son in particular said to me, "Did you see that, Dad?" Knowing that I'd commentated on the race. But you see, everybody was saying, "Did you see that?" It wasn't a question, it was a statement, because people just couldn't believe what they'd seen. And it was almost as if they were wanting affirmation from you. Yes, I did see it. It did happen. Don't worry about it. It did actually happen.
Do you know, sprinting is a really complicated thing, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
But as Mike says, in that moment, there's something beautifully pure about it.
Yep.
There's a simplicity.
Yep.
How fast can you run?
You just, when you're on that start line and you're about to get into the blocks, there is this silence, like a deafening silence within you. If you're ready, there's a definite silence within you, and you're just preparing yourself for every single training session that you've had, every single tear that's been shared. Everything is about to happen on that line. And when you know that you've got 10 seconds to make it happen, there shouldn't be time to do what he did. There shouldn't be time to celebrate the way he did before crossing the line in that fashion. You just say to yourself, I've just got to get from A to B as fast as I can. And in that moment, you're not really thinking about the time you're going to do it in. You just want to win. You go right back down to that pure form of competition. You just want to cross that line first. You do it in 10 seconds or 9.6 seconds, 11.5, 10.9, whatever the time may be. You just want to win. You're not thinking about the time.
So poor old Tyson Gay, struggling with a hamstring injury, he hadn't made it through the semi-final. Yet he's convinced that if he had been there, if he'd been at his best, that he could have pushed Bolt to an even more astonishing time.
Considering he slowed down that race and he went 9.69, I believe he would have had to run through the line and run 9.5 to beat me that race.
He would have run 9.5 something or 9.5 flat, do you think?
I don't know, but he wouldn't have been able to jog, I don't think. But I think he definitely would have ran, I think 9.5 something for sure.
If you'd been shoulder to shoulder with him to put pressure on him in the race?
Yes, sir.
I love the idea that Tyson Gay thinks 9.69 is jogging, by the way.
I don't think I agree with him, you know. I don't think I agree with Tyson in that sense, because when someone's on your shoulder, it's a different race. It's a completely different race. You may revert back to type, you may get tight. And I think with Tyson saying that, I think that's a bit naive from him. I do actually think that it could be a completely different race if someone's on your shoulder the whole way.
And a year later at the World Championships in Beijing, they did face off, and he was pushed to a quicker time. But Bolt, by then, was a year older in the 100 metres, and that was a massive percentage of his career in the 100 metres. He was also 100% older in terms of the 100 metres as well.
So Bolt's victory and the manner of it, coming on the greatest stage of all, made him an instant global superstar. But his agent Ricky Sims says it wasn't all that new to Bolt.
Remember in Jamaica back in 2002 when he won the World Juniors, he was a big star in Jamaica. He was probably one of the best known people then. So he's had it since
15.
Yeah, at 15 years old. So, he had that attention very young, and then it was quieter for a few years. He got a lot of criticism for, around 2004 when he went to the Olympics and he was a little bit injured and didn't get out of the first round. So he had a lot of attention, and then in 2008 it was almost just attention returning again. So I think he's really, really handled it extremely well. It's a tough life he lives. Everything you do is analysed and reported on, and photos of him, anything he does. There's photos in the press, and half of it is exaggerated and made up. But so it's the price of fame is it's not the life that everyone would like, but he understands it, and he just acts himself. He doesn't really care what he said. Look, I'm not doing anything that's illegal. I'm not doing anything that's that's disrespectful to anyone. I'm just a happy guy who lives my life, and that's how the attitude he has to it. And if they want to take pictures of me on the beach with a beer in my hand, or if they want to take pictures of me in the club dancing, then that's what I do. So no problem. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm having fun.
Bolt's agent Ricky Sims in conversation with Mike. Mike, if Bolt had run those times, but he'd done it without the clowning on the blocks, without the posing afterwards, without that natural relish for it all, would it still have made the same impact around the world?
No, it wouldn't, because that's where the connection with the wider audience comes. If that was the case, then Carl Lewis would now be spoken about in the terms that Usain Bolt is. But he reaches out in a completely different way. And that connection, even with the camera, for the 10 seconds that the director is on that lane that Usain Bolt is in, that's different to any other face. Most of the faces, as Jeanette was saying, are very serious, and those who try to be otherwise and they're not their real selves are sometimes impeding and impairing their own performances. But, just recently I've been watching him in Monaco and in the Czech Republic, and on each occasion, and I get that this is his farewell year and so he's making it all the more special, he spent an hour signing autographs. He would have done that more often in the past. He's shooed off the track by officials because they've got to get the next race on. It's that connection. There's never enough time for him to connect with the fans. And that's where he's been so different to anyone else in history. Michael Johnson was often complained about for not giving enough time to fans, and yet he's still looked upon as a legend, and rightly so, but not in the same way, not in the same global appeal as Usain Bolt and those two youngsters on the train that I was talking about at the start of the show. That's the kind of appeal that this man has generated around the world.
As his friend, the reggae musician Shaggy, points out, Bolt really does have that special something, doesn't he, that makes him even more of a star.
It's not the fact that he wins, it's the way he wins. You know what I mean? There's that humility. There's a slight cockiness in the way he wins, but it is so done in such a fun way that it's a humble way. You know what I mean? Here's a guy that is winning by lengths in front of these guys. You know what I mean? And he sits down and he does the to the world pose and go around and he laughs and he does flips and all of that. But it is so genuine that you see it that you're like, it's not like he's being cocky towards you or showing off or you are showboating, as they call it. It's just him really enjoying his win. And he's enjoying his win for all of us to join with him in this winning.
Jeanette, the 200-metre final was 3 nights after the 100. Mm-hmm. Arguably an even more remarkable run. He breaks Michael Johnson's world record of, that extraordinary run of 1930. By that stage, the world is Bolt's, isn't it?
Yeah.
When he has his medal ceremony, they stop everything in the stadium so the crowd can sing happy birthday to him.
I'll never forget that. I just will never forget that. How can you stop everything and sing happy birthday? I've never heard it. I've never seen it before. And here you have this young Jamaican kid, a stadium of 90,000 people singing happy birthday. I thought, wow, he's arrived. He's here. This is it. It's a new dawn. It's a new era. Even more with the fact that Michael Johnson thought that record was going to stay. Everybody did. And the difference between the 100 and the 200, he ran that 200. He ran it like he meant it. He wanted the time. That's the one thing I will say. It was the record he was after more so than it was the gold medal. And you could tell by the way he pushed all the way through. And I think he'd had a bit of criticism a few days previous about the beating of the chest and not running through the line.
Oh, Jacques Rogge, the head of the IOC, had criticised him.
Indeed. And I think that
It seems extraordinary looking back, doesn't it?
I mean, he'd never criticise him now. But I think that when you look back at that and you see Usain running through the line, he thought, well, actually, you know what? Let me see what I can do if I, put my hands down, no beating of the chest and just tie up my laces and go for it.
But the comment from Rogge was just, I think, typical of what so many people were feeling at the time. Is we just didn't know how to deal with this. It was so new. I mean, I loved it, but I come from a boxing background, and he was bringing an element of that to the sport. But here we had, outside of football, the greatest event in sport, and within the Olympic Games, the biggest sport is athletics, and within athletics, the biggest event is the 100 metres, even though we've just been talking about the 200. And we had this new phenomenon winning the 100 metres. It was a really special time for the sport, at a time when the sport needed it. And I've at times avoided the comparisons with Muhammad Ali because Ali had such an impact outside of boxing, but within his sport, Usain Bolt was so important. I remember when Ali won the world heavyweight title for the first time, there was a real stench around boxing about fixed fights, and in 2 high-profile fights just before he won the title in 1964, 2 men had died, and therefore there were real problems for the sport, and there were government commissions calling for it to be banned. And we spoke earlier, right at the start of the programme, about the problems in athletics, the Balco scandal. Marion Jones had gone under, Justin Gatlin had gone under, and people were saying, well, look, if the fastest athletes in the world are going under, what's the future for the sport? But somehow this performance of Usain Bolt in Beijing suddenly lifted the sport, put a smile back on the face of the sport, and gave people, if not the reason to believe, the desire to believe. They wanted to believe in this man.
So, Jeanette, as we come towards the end of these 100 days that shook the world, how grateful should athletics be to Bolt?
They should hold him in the highest regard. Absolutely highest regard. I am honoured to have been an athlete during his era, to have competed in the same competitions, to have partied in the same clubs, to have known, an athlete as great as him. I'm honoured, and it's something that I will tell my children. They probably won't believe me. I'll have to show them the pictures. But if I feel that way, then definitely the sport, the governing body should absolutely look upon this man and say, wow, what a ride.
We're going to miss him when he's gone, aren't we?
We've been spoiled. We have been absolutely spoiled with fast times. And Mike, as a commentator, you've probably looked and thought, am I ever going to see this again?
Absolutely. One of my great wishes is that, I was around at the time to commentate on at least one of Muhammad Ali fights. I didn't get that wish, but I've seen every one of Usain Bolt's global championship finals and another one to come. And if you look down at his times now, and again, this is for those who want to believe, he got quicker from 2008, the one we've been talking about tonight, in the next year. He was quicker in Berlin the following year. Since then, in every one of his global championship finals, he's got slower and slower and slower. So maybe he is getting to the point where he's ready for the taking. And so the timing, I'd suggest, is right. He's 30, he's going to be 31 soon after the Games. He's been competing at this level for more than half his life, and maybe he's picked the right time to go. Sure enough, we can be as sure as we can be that there won't be another like him. There may be an imitation. We've never seen anything like him before. I'm pretty confident in saying we won't see anything like him again, but we should cherish the times that we've had rather than mourn his passing, I think.
Mike Costello, Jeanette Quache, thank you both very much indeed.
Sports with Sean Caravilles. The Villas.